The world is talking now, but no one truly knows how it all began. The headlines exploded with one shocking phrase: "Can Yaman's secret island wedding?" Millions clicked instantly, trying to understand how one of the most followed, most photographed, most speculated celebrities could hide something so big, and for so long. But the truth is much more complicated than a simple rumor. It didn't begin with a dress, a ring, or a ceremony. It began with silence, heavy, calculated, dangerous silence. For months, people around Ken noticed something different, something subtle. He was moving carefully, avoiding unnecessary crowds, postponing certain events, and traveling more privately than ever before. Fans assumed it was because of his new projects, maybe a series he was preparing for, maybe a film. But no, this was something else entirely. This was the kind of secrecy someone chooses when they're protecting something, or someone, very important. No one knew that during those months, Ken wasn't just acting. He was planning. He was choosing places where cameras wouldn't reach, people wouldn't notice, and voices wouldn't echo. And exactly because of that, he selected a remote Greek island, small, quiet, invisible to the public eye. An island where even the residents mind their own business. A place where no one would question a private boat arriving at midnight. It all started with a decision he made one night in Rome after an unexpectedly emotional conversation with a friend he trusted. "If you want something to stay yours," the friend told him, "you keep it away from the world." Those words stayed in his mind, repeating like an echo. Maybe because he had lived too long with the opposite, relationships exposed, emotions dissected, and rumors created from nothing. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he simply didn't want to lose this time. So, he did something almost no one believed he was capable of: he disappeared. Not publicly, no disappearance would go unnoticed. He disappeared emotionally, mentally, privately. He started limiting who knew where he was going. He told his closest team members half-truths. He avoided giving explanations. He became busy, unavailable, focused. In reality, he was arranging everything for one single night. The island was chosen for a reason. It wasn't glamorous, not even particularly beautiful compared to the famous Greek postcards. But it was isolated. One narrow road, one tiny port, a handful of fishermen, and a hilltop chapel that rarely opened its doors. Locals used it only for very private occasions, funerals, baptisms, and sometimes, weddings no one talks about. That chapel became the center of the mystery. No paparazzi knew its name. No drone could fly near it without being noticed. No tourist ever walked that path unless they knew exactly where to go. And that's where Ken's plan silently pointed. On the evening before the night, he arrived quietly, no security, no noise, no spotlight. Just one boat, one captain, and one reason. The captain later told someone, he said nothing during the whole trip, but his eyes looked like he had already made the biggest decision of his life. When Ken stepped onto the island, the wind was strong, the sky soft, and the air strangely calm. He wasn't nervous, he was focused. Determined. Whatever would happen on that island, he intended to keep it away from the world forever. But secrets this big have a way of leaking, especially when emotions run deeper than control. And what happened that night was not what anyone expected. The second part of the story begins long before Ken reached the island's chapel. Because what happened that night wasn't supposed to involve anyone else. The whole plan was built on one principle: no guests, no cameras, no eyes, no noise. Just two people, a quiet place, and a decision that would stay hidden from the world. But life never respects perfect plans. When Ken arrived at the small stone house prepared for him, the island was nearly asleep. Doors were closed, lights were dim, and the sea was the only sound echoing between the cliffs. The caretaker who kept the house ready for a private visit had already left hours earlier. Everything inside looked untouched: one table, two chairs, a candle, and a small handwritten note that simply said, "The chapel will be open at midnight." Nothing more. No signature. No explanation. Just a message that confirmed what he already knew: everything was ready. But what he didn't know was that someone else had arrived on the island earlier that day. A fisherman's son. Barely 20 years old, curious, restless, and fascinated by anything unusual, had seen a particular boat docking that afternoon. It was a sleek, private boat he had never seen before, owned by someone foreign, someone discreet. And the boy, working near the pier, noticed the boat unload 2 items that didn't fit the usual island routine: a luxury garment bag and a small white box that looked suspiciously like a ceremonial case. He didn't think much at first. But the island was small, gossip was oxygen, and curiosity was a habit. Hours later, he saw a second man arriving, a priest. But not the island's usual priest. This one was younger, unknown, and clearly not there for a funeral. He carried documents, a book, and carefully wrapped fabric. Something was happening, something private, something secret. And the boy, unable to resist, followed him from a distance. Meanwhile, Ken was inside the stone house, preparing himself emotionally for the night. He sat alone, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, thinking intensely about the next hours. There was no rehearsal, no public vows, no applause, no audience. He had lived relationships under magnifying glasses for years. Not tonight. Tonight belonged only to him and one other person. But secrecy has a fragile nature. Small actions turn into clues. And clues turn into stories. The boy wasn't the only unexpected witness. A woman staying in the only guest house on the island. An Italian tourist who had arrived seeking silence, noticed something unusual as well. She heard voices near the chapel around sunset, soft but tense, like 2 people practicing something. She assumed it was locals preparing for a private memorial. But when she walked closer, she saw a photographer. Not a professional one, just a young woman holding an older camera, the kind people use to collect memories, not publish scandals. Still, her presence was strange. 2 unexpected witnesses. Neither invited. Both silently watching from different corners of the island. They didn't know what they were witnessing. Not yet. Back in the stone house, Ken stood up, went to the window, and looked out toward the path leading to the chapel. The sky was turning darker, stars just beginning to appear. He took a deep breath, straightened his jacket, and closed his eyes for a moment. If he was nervous, his face didn't show it. If he had doubts, they didn't reach his expression. His decision was made. But outside, on that quiet island, small pieces were already moving. The fisherman's son was following shadows. The tourist was watching lights flicker near the chapel. The amateur photographer was adjusting her lens, unaware of the gravity of what she might capture. And all of them were about to witness a night the world was never meant to find out about, a night that would later explode into the biggest shock of Yaman's career. Midnight on the island didn't look like midnight anywhere else. There were no city lights, no distant car sounds, no people walking home late. There was only the sea crashing against the rocks and the occasional rustle of wind passing through the olive trees. The island felt frozen in time, exactly the kind of place someone would choose if they wanted the world to forget they existed for a few hours. And that was precisely why Ken chose it. The chapel waited on the hill like a silent witness. Small, ancient, and almost mystical under the moonlight. Its stone walls glowed faintly, the wooden door slightly open as if it already knew what was coming. A single candle inside flickered gently, painting the interior with warm, golden shadows. Ken walked slowly up the path leading to it, his footsteps muffled by the dust and dirt beneath him. Every few meters, he stopped, not because he doubted his decision, but because he needed to absorb the silence. He needed this final hour before everything changed. But he wasn't alone. The fisherman's son was hiding behind an old tree near the lower part of the hill, watching carefully, barely breathing. He had never been this close to a celebrity, especially one that the entire Mediterranean region practically worshipped. What was Ken doing here? Why so secretly? Why at midnight? The boy didn't know yet. But he would soon. Further up the path, the Italian tourist stood at a distance with her arms wrapped around herself, watching the chapel lights flicker stronger. She wasn't a gossip seeker. She wasn't even a fan. But something about the atmosphere drew her in, a feeling that something significant was unfolding on this island. She didn't want to interrupt. But she couldn't walk away either. Ken reached the chapel door, hesitated only for a heartbeat, then pushed it open. Inside, the priest was waiting, standing beside a small wooden table with a closed book and a thin gold ribbon. The room smelled faintly of old incense and sea air. The candlelight danced across the walls, illuminating the faint, faded icons painted centuries ago. But one thing was missing, the person who was supposed to stand across from him. He glanced around, then checked the time. She was late, but not because she had changed her mind. There had been delays, complications, risks. Every step of this night required secrecy, precision, and absolute trust. The seconds felt longer inside the chapel. Finally, Ken heard footsteps, soft, hesitant, familiar. He turned, and the air in the room shifted instantly. The woman stepping through the doorway looked almost unreal under the candlelight. Her hair was slightly tousled by the wind, her dress simple but elegant, and her expression, emotional in a way she had never shown publicly. She wasn't a stranger. She wasn't a rebound. She wasn't a rumor. She was the reason he had risked everything to bring this night to life. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the entire island felt silent, completely, impossibly silent. She approached slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you sure about this?" Ken didn't look away. "I've never been more sure. No cameras. No guests. No spotlight. Just two people facing the biggest decision of their lives." The priest stepped forward, opening his book with steady hands. "If this is truly what you both want," he said, "then this night will stay between you, me, and God." They nodded silently. But outside, the world had other plans. Because while the ceremony began, the amateur photographer, drawn by the distant glow of candlelight, raised her camera. She didn't know who was inside. She didn't know what was happening. She simply thought the moment looked beautiful. She pressed the shutter. Click. A single sound that would later turn a private promise into global chaos. Inside the chapel, Ken reached for her hands, their fingers trembling slightly. The priest began speaking softly, his words echoing gently through the small room. Outside the chapel, 3 witnesses stood breathless, each holding a piece of the truth, without even understanding its magnitude. The wedding that wasn't supposed to be seen had just been captured. And the world would soon erupt. Inside the chapel, every word spoken, every breath shared, every small gesture between Ken and the woman standing across from him carried the weight of years of misunderstandings, distance, and quiet feelings no one ever fully knew. Their connection wasn't something built overnight. It wasn't a spontaneous romance or a publicity stunt. It was something deeper, older, more fragile, something the world had pulled apart once before. And now, here they were. Standing under a single candle, whispering vows meant only for each other. The priest's voice was low, solemn. "Marriage," he said gently, "is not about being seen. It is about being understood." Ken's eyes shifted momentarily, because being seen was exactly what had ruined so much of his life in the first place. The spotlight was a blessing and a curse, a force that lifted him to fame but tore apart anything intimate he tried to build. That was why this night mattered. That was why it had to stay hidden. But outside, the universe had already started working in the opposite direction. The amateur photographer, who had wandered the island out of pure boredom, was now staring at her camera screen, zooming in slowly, trying to understand what she had just captured. The chapel window was small, narrow, covered with fogged glass, but at the perfect second, the wind had shifted, the candle had flared, and the silhouette of 2 figures standing close, much too close, became clear in the frame. A man, tall, broad-shouldered. A woman, standing inches from him. And the unmistakable outline of a ceremonial gesture. The photographer froze. It didn't occur to her, not yet, that the man might be a celebrity. She simply knew she had captured something intimate, something sacred. And the more she looked at the image, the more she felt like she had invaded a moment that wasn't hers. A pang of guilt formed. She lowered the camera. But the fisherman's son had seen her. And he had seen the flash. He rushed toward her, unable to contain his curiosity. "What are you photographing?" he whispered urgently. She hesitated. "Nothing. Just the chapel." It looked beautiful. He didn't believe her. The boy, fueled by adrenaline and mystery, grabbed the camera gently, but quickly enough to take a look before she could stop him. And the moment his eyes landed on the silhouette, he felt his heart nearly jump out of his chest. "That's him," he whispered. "That's Yaman." The photographer's eyes widened. "Wait, what? Are you sure?" "Everyone here knows his face," the boy said breathlessly. "And he arrived tonight. Secretly. With someone." Suddenly, the photograph wasn't just a photograph. It was a story. A massive, explosive story. The kind of story that didn't stay on an island. Meanwhile, up at the chapel, Ken gently placed a ring on her finger. His voice trembled, not from nerves, but from intensity. "I don't want the world to define us ever again," he whispered. "Tonight is ours." Her eyes softened. "Then let's promise to protect it." They both looked at the priest, who nodded and closed the book. "It is done." A soft exhale escaped both of them. Relief. Peace. A moment that felt outside of time. But peace never lasts, not for people like Can. Because while the newlywed couple walked out of the chapel, the photographer and the fisherman's son were arguing in the shadows. She wanting to delete the photo, him insisting that the world deserved to know, emotions clashing under the moonlight. And that's when it happened. A gust of wind, a slip of the hand, a sudden movement, and the boy dropped the camera. It hit the ground, the screen cracked, and the memory card popped out, sliding across the dirt. The tourist at the bottom of the hill noticed the commotion, walked toward them, and picked up the small memory card before either of them realized what she had done. And in that strange, quiet, accidental moment, the truth about the island night had been scattered between three strangers. None of them intended to expose anything. None of them fully understood what they had seen. None of them realized they were holding a secret the world would explode over. Inside the chapel, Can and his partner believed the night was protected. Outside, destiny was preparing to do the exact opposite. The morning after the secret ceremony should have been peaceful. It should have been quiet, intimate, untouched by anything outside that tiny Greek island. But destiny, once again, had a different script prepared for Yaman. The sun rose slowly over the cliffs, painting the water gold. The island was still half asleep, fishermen preparing their nets, the small cafe opening its shutters, seagulls calling in the distance. Inside the stone house, Can and his partner were finally breathing freely for the first time in months. No cameras. No pressure. No noise. They drank their morning coffee in total silence, sharing small smiles, soft touches, moments they hadn't been able to enjoy without someone watching or judging. For a few hours, the world didn't exist. But the world was already moving. Down in the village, the three accidental witnesses from the night before were each dealing with their own piece of the truth. The fisherman's son had spent the entire night awake, replaying the silhouette from the photograph in his mind. He was torn between excitement and guilt. Part of him felt like he had discovered something enormous. Another part whispered that what he had seen wasn't his to reveal. The amateur photographer was panicking. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, the image flashed again, two figures inside the chapel, the unmistakable outline of a ring, the intensity of the moment. She had come to the island to find peace, not to accidentally capture something that could destroy someone's private life. And the Italian tourist, the one holding the memory card, was quietly preparing to leave the island. She had made her decision. She wasn't going to get involved. She didn't want trouble. But before she left, she placed the memory card on a small table in the guesthouse lobby, wrapped in a plain napkin. A small gesture. Meant to disappear. But fate doesn't work like that. The guesthouse owner found the napkin, opened it out of simple curiosity, and saw the memory card. He assumed a customer had forgotten it. Following his usual routine, he inserted it into the small computer behind the counter to identify the owner. And that was the moment everything changed. Because the very first image that appeared on the screen, the one unlucky frame captured through the chapel window, made his breath stop. He recognized the silhouette instantly. He recognized the woman instantly. His hands began to shake. He didn't upload it. He didn't send it. He didn't share it maliciously. He simply stared at it while a single thought repeated over and over, "This can't stay hidden." Later that morning, he called his cousin, the one who worked at a small entertainment blog in Athens. "I think I've found something," he said in a trembling voice. That phone call was the spark. Within hours, the photograph, grainy, blurry, and yet unmistakable, appeared online with one headline, "Who got married on the island last night?" Rumors point to Yaman. At first, no one believed it. Then everyone did. The image spread like wildfire: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Greek tabloids, Italian media, Turkish entertainment shows. Each platform added more speculation, more theories, more chaos. Fans zoomed in, compared outlines, matched hairstyles, body shapes, shoulders, posture. The internet worked faster than any investigative journalist ever could. Inside the stone house, Can's phone began vibrating non-stop. He ignored it at first. Then the second vibration came. Then the third. Then dozens. Finally, he glanced at the screen, and saw it. A single message from his manager: "Call me now." That was the moment his face changed. That was the moment the silence ended. His partner approached him slowly. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft but already trembling. He turned the phone around to show her the headline, the photo, the chaos. Her hand flew to her mouth. "No, no, impossible." "How did they?" Ken closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and whispered, "We didn't hide from the world. We hid on an island. But you can't hide from destiny."